Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make this lovely jumping fireball a la Mario. Now, obviously, you can tweak all the physics and make it customizable to how you want, but if you enjoy this sort of tutorial, well, feel free to leave a like down below, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more. But for reference, I did follow all of these instructions myself without looking at them, so hopefully it helps. To start, you want to turn on Grid Snap and sculpt a sphere. Now, I like to use Grid Snap because you do have to create two objects right here that have to be the same size, but obviously they don't have to be this exact. It's just sort of a pet peeve. Following that, you're going to scope out and create a separate sculpt of a cube that is the same dimensions, and when you place it over the sphere, as I will do here, it completely encompasses it. Again, this is just the order that I went in. I'm sure once you watch it, you will be able to figure out some shortcuts. Turn off the grid there, scope back into that square, or cube, I suppose, and shrink it so that it is just a tiny little platform at the bottom. This is going to be the base of your contraption and will be completely invisible, so don't worry about it looking pretty. Now you're going to go into the view settings, right there, and uncheck preview invisibility. This will hopefully give you an idea of where our shapes are as you then tweak the base there, go to the physics setting and turn off visible because like I said, it's the base and we don't really care about it. Now you're going to go to the collision settings, turn off object, go to labels, and then turn on object. That way it's labeled an object, but it won't collide with other objects. And then go into the sphere itself and label it an object as well. Now you're going to take both of the objects, select them and group them together. And at this point, I like to turn on X-ray mode, but be careful because it can make it confusing as to what's inside and outside of a group. But then scope into that group by holding L1 and pressing X, and place down a timeline. Go into that timeline by holding L1 and pressing X. And then you're going to keyframe the starting position. Grab a keyframe, place it at the beginning of the timeline, and grab that sphere to make it your starting position. It's very, very important that you are scoped into this group while doing these keyframes, and that the timeline, or at least the keyframes, are inside of them. Tweak those keyframes, turn on keep changes, and turn off smoothing, because I just completely forgot what smoothing was, but I turn that off almost all the time because it tends to really mess up my animations. But copy that first keyframe. I tend to put it about a second later, doesn't really matter. You can tweak this, depending on what you want, but tweak that second keyframe that you just copied, turn on precision mode, and now you're going to drag this up to the crest of its jump. This should all be in place because we're going to add movement later on, but for right now, we're just trying to make it jump in place. Copy the first keyframe and put it after the second keyframe, and then add blending. I tend to use the logarithmic blending for the first one and the parabolic blending for the second one, as it tends to make the smoothest jump. And then you're going to take that last keyframe and extend it a little bit so that there has a delay between the jumps. Don't want to just jumping all over the place. It's going to look unnatural, and if it's chasing your player, which is what we're making it do, well, it's just not going to be pretty, and you're going to die while you're testing it. But then you want to tweak the settings of the timeline itself, turn on loop, and then you can tweak the playback speed to whatever makes sense for your fireball, or, well, I guess whatever you decide to use these techniques for, whether it be good or bad or something in between. Please don't use these techniques for evil. I hold no responsibility for anything that involves evil created from these lovely fireballs. And any players killed therein. And if you couldn't tell, I'm, delaying for time because clearly there's a big section here that I just played around and tweaked things with. But definitely, if you do tweak that timeline and make it a little bit faster like I did, increase the length of that final keyframe so that there's actually delay between the jumps, because if you don't, well, it's just going to go faster, and that means there's going to be less delay. So now hit L3 to pause and rewind, and then scope all the way out, and then you're going to go into the gadgets and the movers there and place down a gyroscope. Now, it's really important that you're scoped out at this point. Like I said, make sure you're paying attention to that sort of thing. But here you're going to tweak the gyroscope and turn strength and dampening all the way up to 100%. Then in the second tab, grab the output for affected objects and connect it to the group of the two shapes that we made. Again, it's very important that you connect it to the group, Now grab a follower and tweak the strength to 80%, and tweak the dampening to 100%. You can change this later and play with it if you want to, but this seems to work the best for me. And now you're going to change the tag name to follow me, which is the default inside the character tag. But if you have a different tag inside your character, you can use that as well. So now you're going to go to the second tab and change the max follow distance. I use 5 meters because that works for me. But then you want to set the Y strength and the Y dampening to 0. Make sure it's the Y. You don't want this following your character up and down. If you do, you can change that, but well, I don't. And of course, like I said, I set the speed to 5 meters per second. It's totally up to you. Now, go to the third tab and connect the affected objects to the group again. So both the gyroscope and the follower should be connected to the group, not the individual objects inside. And finally, tweak that group and turn on movable. Make sure you're tweaking the group, not the individual objects. And then you can scope into that group, open the timeline there, and then scope out of the group with the timeline still open, so you can place the follower inside there. Make sure that follower extends all the way during that animation jump, but doesn't work during the stagnant between jumps phase, which is that final keyframe. And finally, I actually grab that gyroscope and then hover over the group and hold L1 and press X to add it to the group and place it within there. That way it still affects the entire group because we connected it outside of the group, but once you place it within the group, it means that the gyroscope will stick with the group while it moves. So for example, as you see it moving here, you could then go back into edit mode and see that the gyroscope is still right next to it. And this is really important if you're going to use this for emitters specifically. But yeah, there you go. You made a jumping fireball, or well, more a following ball that's kind of creepy looking. But the idea of this video wasn't really to say, hey, maybe you need a jumping fireball, but well, that's what I was looking for when I ended up making this myself. But the point of this video was to kind of explain the concepts behind this and hopefully give you an idea of what to pay attention to when you're creating stuff yourself. This was largely born out of the idea that I had when I was just absolutely a mess initially with animations. I had no idea how to use them effectively and how to use them within groups so you could create animated objects that were then very easy to move around outside of that. The best metaphor that I can give you for how the grouping versus outside of the group works is that when you have a group, it counts itself as its own world. So all of the different settings and changes you make within that group, for example, all of the physics changes, anything you make within that group is in reference to other objects within the group. So if you turn on movable, things in the group can move in reference to each other. So like that ball could move away from the square if you turned on movable within the group. But we didn't want that. We wanted the animation to be the only movement inside that group, inside that world. And that means that when you scope out of that group, you're in a completely different world that contains that world inside it. And so the world inside it moves all together as itself. And that's why you want to be careful about having things within groups that move independently of each other, because then when you try to make things or that entire world move together while you're scoped out of that group, it can kind of get confusing and not quite work. But hopefully that's helpful. If this video was helpful to you, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more like this. But hopefully you just learned something today, and hopefully I gave you a good metaphor, because like I said, this entire video was born out of necessity for me, and so hopefully it helps someone out there. Definitely make sure to tweak this fireball, make sure it actually looks like a fireball, but otherwise, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are doing well, and have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you in the next video. But for now, goodbye. That's all the goodbye you're getting for now.